Well, good evening, boys! What's up? I hope this was an appropriate intro for today. You liked it? And, yeah. Merry Christmas! It is Christmas over here. I know it's Christmas Eve elsewhere. We Germans are weird. We do it today. And, we have everything behind us. So the wife is in bed. She's sleepy. And, she's fed. And I, got my present from her. And she got her present from me. And, yeah. Fuck yeah, Christmas. Now, we gonna read. That would be a good idea. Here we go, exactly. How's everyone doing on Christmas Eve today? Man, I tell you. Today, I went like into... I was up at like 5:30 this morning. And then I was like, oh, Jesus Christ. And then like at 8:30, I laid down again because I was like, I'm not putting up with this shit. And then I was again awake at 11:30. And then I was like, oh, fuck. I still need to go and do some groceries. I needed some pineapple for tomorrow. And I forgot to order the pineapple with the big haul. And yeah, so I had to get out again, get some pineapple. And let me tell you, people on Christmas Eve going shopping, it's a fucking nightmare. Don't do it. I've not done it in years. I've not done it in fucking years. But I will never do it again if I can avoid it. Also, get better soon, Crumb. And yeah, welcome to the stream, everyone. I see a King Alpha. I see a Crumb. I see a Lacerto. I see a Strategy Informant. I see a Charity Champ. Hope you're doing all well, except for Crumb. Crumb, you get better soon. Yeah. Tonight, I don't know if we get through it all. I plan on, but it's a lot. It's a lot because I'm going to read Charles Dickens, a Christmas classic. A Christmas Carol from the Project Gutenberg website. I'm gonna send you a link. The flesh is weak. I want to become Beep Bop. I want to become a robot. A robot is nice. This is the link. So you maybe want to read along. I don't know. Maybe you want to. So what is the Christmas Carol? A little introduction. It is the story of Ebenezer Scrooge, who gets visited by the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future. And it has been filmed like in a lot, and I mean a lot of movies, like direct adaptions and indirect adaptions. I think the best adaptation that you can watch is the one with Bill Murray, which I just know the German title of, which is Die Geister, die ich rief. But that doesn't do any shit for you, so I have to look up the English title. Scrooged, exactly. Scrooged. Scrooged is probably the best one you can watch. But when you ask me, right? Scrooge isn't really a faithful one. No, it's not, but it's the funniest. It is definitely the funniest. You can't change my mind on that. I think it's the least faithful, probably, but it's also the kind of like the best. that you can watch. It's based on it though. It really is. There's other movies. I think there's like one directly made by Disney. That stars Jim Carrey. It's like one of those weird animated stuff thingies. With Jim Carrey, because they were like on this like war path with doing all important and relevant Christmas properties with Jim Carrey, the Grinch, and he did Ebenezer Scrooge in the Christmas Carol adaptation. I think he did. I'm not sure. Point being, The Christmas Carol is a very important work in literature, and I think it is also a very poignant story about Christmas itself. Normally, you do not have like a lot of stories about a holiday that like encapsulate really the spirit of the holiday. I think A Christmas Carol does it really well, and is a little bit horrifying. As we go on. I mean, it's like from 1800 whatever, but yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna start reading. If you have any questions, if you want me to stop or whatever, throw it in chat. I want to make sure I will, like, when I read the creepypasta, I will, before I answer any question, I will go through the what is it called? Yeah, you know what I mean. Not sentences, like the collection of sentences that's like split apart. Jesus Christ, my English is so bad today. What the fuck is going on? Imagine being named Ebenezer. I'd become a dick too. Yeah, Ebenezer Scrooge is absolutely a thing. Merry Christmas, Ghost Trick. Welcome. So yeah, exactly. I'm going through the paragraphs, and then if there's something in chat once I finish a paragraph, I'm gonna stop and talk to chat again, like with the creepypasta. The link is pinned if you want to read along, and yeah, let's read A Christmas Carol in prose, being a ghost story of Christmas. Stave 1. Marley's ghost. Marley was dead to begin with. There's no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it, and Scrooge's name was good upon, change for anything he chose to put his hand onto. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. Mind, I don't mean to say that I know of my knowledge what there is particular dead about a doornail. I might have been inclined myself to regard a coffin nail as the deadest piece of ironmongery in the trade. But the wisdom of our ancestors is in the simile, and my unhallowed hands shall not disturb it, or the countries done for. You will therefore permit me to repeat emphatically that Marley was dead, the doornail. Scrooge knew he was dead. Of course he did. How could it be otherwise? Scrooge and he were partners for I don't know how many years. Scrooge was his sole executor, his sole administrator, his sole assign, his sole residuary legatee, his sole friend, and sole mourner. And even Scrooge was not so dreadful, caught up by the sad event, but that he was an excellent man of business on the very day of the funeral, and solemnized it with an undoubted bargain. The mention of Marley's funeral brings me back to the point I started from. There's no doubt that Marley was dead. This must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come of the story I'm going to relate. If we were not perfectly convinced that Hamlet's father died before the play began, there would be nothing remarkable in his taking a stroll at night in an easterly wind upon his own ramparts than there would be in any other middle-aged gentleman rashly turning out after dark in a breezy spot, St. Paul's churchyard, for instance, literally to astonish his son's weak mind. Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name. There it stood, years afterwards, above the warehouse door. Scrooge and Marley. The firm was known as Scrooge and Marley. Sometimes people knew to the business called Scrooge, and sometimes Marley, but he answered to both names. It was all the same to him. Oh, but he was tight-fisted. But he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, Scrooge. A squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. Hard and sharp as a flint, from which no steel had ever struck out generous fire, secret and self-contained, and solitary as an oyster. The cold within him froze his old features, nipped with his pointed nose, shriveled his cheeks, stiffened his gait, made his eyes red, his thin lips blue, and spoke out shrewdly in his grating voice. A frosty rime was on his head, and on his eyebrows, and his wiry chin. He carried his own low temperature, always about him. He iced his office in dark days, and didn't thaw it on 1 degree at Christmas. Cold office. External heat and cold had little influence on Scrooge. No warmth could warm, no wintry weather chill him. No wind that blew was bitter than he. No falling snow was more intent upon its purpose. No pelting rain less open to entreaty. Foul weather didn't know where to have him. The heaviest rain and snow, and hail and sleet, could boast the advantage over him in only one respect. They often came down handsomely, and Scrooge never did. That's actually one of my favorite sentences in this entire thing. It's basically, yeah, even Mother Nature will give you more. You never asked for it, but it will give you more than Ebenezer Scrooge ever will. Because this man is so fucking tight-fisted, yeah? There is no way you ever get money from this person. Nobody ever stopped him in the street to say, with gladsome looks, "My dear Scrooge, how are you? When will you come to see me?" No beggars implored him to bestow a trifle. No children asked him what it was o'clock. No man or woman ever once in all his life inquired the way to such and such a place of Scrooge. Even the blind man's dogs appeared to know him, and when they saw him coming, would tuck their owners into doorways and up courts, and then would wag their tails as though they said, "No eye at all is better than an evil eye, dog master." But what did Scrooge care? It was the very thing he liked. To edge his way along the crowded paths of life, warning all human sympathy to keep its distance. Was that the knowing one's call nuts to Scrooge? Once upon a time, of all the good days in the year on Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy in his house, in his counting house. It was cold, bleak, biting weather, foggy withal, and he could hear the people in the court outside go wheezing up and down, beating their hands upon their breasts and slamming their feet upon the pavement to warm them. The city clocks had only just gone 3, but it was quite dark already. It had not been light all day, and candles were flaring in the windows of the neighboring offices like ruddy smears upon the palpable brown air. The fog came pouring in at every chink and keyhole, and so dense without it that, although the court was the narrowest, the houses opposite were mere phantoms. To see dingy clouds come drooping down, obscuring everything one might have thought that nature lived hard by and was brewing on a large scale. Wow! What is wow, Ghost Trick Alucard? The door of Scrooge's counting house was open, that he might keep his eye upon the clerk, who in a dismal little cell beyond the sort of tank was copying letters. Scrooge had a very small fire, but the clerk's fire was so very much smaller that it looked like one coal. But he couldn't replenish it, for Scrooge kept the coal box in his own room, and so surely as the clerk came in with the shovel, the master predicted that it would be necessary for them to part. Wherefore the clerk put in his white comforter and tried to warm himself at the candle, in which effort, not being a man of strong imagination, he failed. A Merry Christmas, Uncle. God save you, cried a cheerful voice. It was the voice of Scrooge's nephew, who came upon him so quickly that this was the first intimation he had of his approach. "Bah!" said Scrooge. "Humbug!" He had so heated himself with rapidly walking in the fog and frost, this nephew of Scrooge's, that he was all in a glow. His face was ruddy and handsome. His eyes sparkled, and his breath smoked again. Christmas a humbug, Uncle, said Scrooge's nephew. You don't mean that, I'm sure. I do, said Scrooge. Merry Christmas. What right have you to be merry? What reason have you to be merry? You're poor enough. Come on then, returned the nephew gaily. What right do you have to be so dismal? What reason have you to be morose? You're rich enough. Scrooge, having no better answer ready, on the spur of a moment said, "Bah!" Again, followed up with humbug. Don't be cross, Uncle, said the nephew. So if you're reading along, there's like a really nice drawing in the book right now. That kind of shows the scene. And yeah. The book was illustrated when it first came out as well. I don't know who drew the pictures, but I've seen his work in other things too. Like there was a name attached to it. I don't remember who it was though. What else can I be? Returned Dan. When I live in such a world of fools as this, Merry Christmas! Out upon Merry Christmas! What's Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without money? A time for finding yourself a year older and not an hour richer. I'm for balancing your books and having every item in them through a round dozen of months presented debt against you. If I could work my will, said Scrooge indignantly. Every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart, he should. Uncle, pleaded the nephew. Nephew? Returned the uncle sternly. Keep Christmas in your own way and let it keep it in mine. Keep it, repeated Scrooge's nephew. But you don't keep it. Let me leave it alone then, said Scrooge. Much good may it do you. Much good it has ever done you. There are many things from which I might have derived good, but by which I have not profited, I dare say, returned the nephew. Christmas among the rest. But I'm sure I have always thought of Christmas time. When it has come around, apart from the veneration due to its sacred name and origins, if anything belonging to it can be apart from that, it's a good time. A kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. The only time I know of in the long calendar of the year when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut-up hearts freely and to think of people below them as if they really were fellow passengers to the grave, and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys. And therefore, Uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket. I believe that it has done me good and will do me good. And I say, bless it. Merry Christmas, Eonut. Welcome. The clerk in the tank involuntarily applauded, becoming immediately sensible of the impropriety. He poked the fire and extinguished the last frail spark forever. "Let me hear another sound from you," said Scrooge, "and you'll keep your Christmas by losing your situation. You're quite a powerful speaker, sir," he added, turning to his nephew. "I wonder you don't go into Parliament." "I want my ho-ho-hos. The ho-hos. The ho-hos are here." "Don't be angry, Uncle. Come, dine with us tomorrow." Scrooge said that he would see him. Yes, indeed he did. He went the whole length of the expression and said that he would see him in that extremity. "But why?" cried Scrooge's nephew. "Why?" "Why did you get married?" said Scrooge. "Because I fell in love." "Because you fell in love," growled Scrooge, as if there was the only one thing in the world more ridiculous than a Merry Christmas. "Good afternoon." "Nay, Uncle, but you never came to see me before that happened. Why give it a reason for not coming now?" "Good afternoon," said Scrooge. "I want nothing from you. I ask nothing of you. Why cannot we be friends?" "Good afternoon," said Scrooge. "I'm sorry with all my heart to find you so resolute. We have never had any quarrel to which I have been a party, but I have made the trial in homage to Christmas. Now I'll keep my Christmas humor to the last. So Merry Christmas, Uncle." "Good afternoon," said Scrooge, "and a Happy New Year." "Good afternoon," said Scrooge. His nephew left the room without an angry word, notwithstanding. He stopped at the outer door to bestow the greetings of the season on the clerk, who, cold as he was warmer than Scrooge, for he returned them cordially. There's another fellow, muttered Scrooge, who overheard him. "My clerk with 15 shillings a week, and a wife, and a family. Talking about Merry Christmas. I retire to Bedlam." This lunatic, in letting Scrooge's nephew out, had let 2 other people in. They were portly gentlemen, pleasant to behold, and now stood, with their hats off, in Scrooge's office. They had books and papers in their hands, and bowed to him. "Scrooge Marley, I believe?" said one of the gentlemen, referring to his list. "Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley?" "We have no doubt his liberality is well represented by his surviving partners," said the gentleman, presenting his credentials. "I certainly was, but they had been 2 kindred spirits." At the ominous word liberality, Scrooge frowned and shook his head. and handed the credentials back. At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, said the gentleman, taking up a pen, it is more than usually desirable that we should make some light provision for the poor and destitute who suffer greatly at the present time. Many thousands are in want of common necessaries. Hundreds of thousands are in want of common comforts, sir. Are there no prisons? Asked Scrooge. Plenty of prisons, said the gentleman, laying down the pen again. And the union workhouses? Demanded Scrooge. Are they still in operation? They are, still, returned the gentleman. I wish I could say they were not. The treadmill and poor law are in full vigor then, said Scrooge. Both are very busy, sir. Oh, I was afraid from what you said at first. That something had occurred to stop them in their useful course, said Scrooge. I'm very glad to hear it. Under the impression that they scarcely furnish Christian cheer of mind or body to the multitude, returned the gentleman, a few of us endeavoring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink, a means of warmth. We choose this time because it is a time of all others, when want is keenly felt and abundance rejoices. What shall I put you down for? Nothing, Scrooge replied. You wish to be anonymous? I wish to be left alone, said Scrooge. Since you ask me what I wish, gentlemen, that is my answer. I don't marry myself at a Christmas. And I don't afford to make idle people merry. I help to support the establishments I have mentioned. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there. Many can't go there, and many would rather die. They would rather die? Said Scrooge. They better do it and decrease the surplus population. Besides, excuse me, I don't know that. But you might know it, observed the gentleman. It's none of my business, returned Scrooge. It's enough for a man to understand his own business, and not to interfere with other people's. Mine occupies me constantly. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Seeing clearly that it would be useless to pursue their point, the gentleman withdrew. Scrooge resumed his labors with an improved opinion of himself, and in more factious temper than was usual with him. Reading A Christmas Carol, cool. Welcome, Ido. Yeah, that's what we do. I have the link pinned if you want to read along. I'm at paragraph 19. Meanwhile, the fog and darkness thickened so that people ran about with flaring links, proffering their services to go before horses and carriages and conduct them on their way. The ancient tower of a church, whose gruff-old bell was always peeping slyly down at Scrooge out of a Gothic window in the wall, became invisible and struck the hours and quarters in the clouds with tremulous vibrations afterwards, as if its teeth were chattering in its frozen head up there. The cold became intense in the main street. At the corner of the court, some laborers were repairing the gas pipes and had lighted a great fire in a brazier, round which a party of ragged men and boys were gathered, warming their hands and winking their eyes before the blaze in rapture. The water plug being left in solitude, its overflowing suddenly congealed and turned to misanthropic ice. The brightness of the shops, where holly sprigs and berries crackled in the lamp heat of the windows, made pale faces ruddy as they passed. Poulterers and grocers' trades became a splendid joke, a glorious pageant with which it was next to impossible to believe that such dull principles as bargain and sale had anything to do. The Lord Mayor in the stronghold of the mighty mansion house gave orders to his 50 cooks and butlers to keep Christmas as a Lord Mayor's household should, and even the little tailor, whom he had fined 5 shillings on the previous Monday for being drunk and bloodthirsty in the streets, stirred up a tomorrow pudding in his garret, while his lean wife and the baby sallied out to buy the beef. Foggier yet and colder. Piercing, searching, biting cold. If the good St. Dunstan had but nipped the evil spirit's nose with a touch of such weather as that, instead of using his familiar weapons, then indeed he would have roared to lusty purpose. The owner of one scant young nose gnawed and mumbled by the hungry cold, as bones are gnawed by dogs, stooped down at Scrooge's keyhole to regale him with a Christmas carol. But at the first sound of "God bless you, merry gentlemen, may nothing you dismay," Scrooge seized the ruler with such energy of action that the singer fled in terror, leaving the keyhole to the fog, an even more congenial frost. At length, the hour of shutting up the counting house arrived. With an ill will, Scrooge dismounted from his stool and tacitly admitted that the fact to the expectant clerk in the tank, who instantly snuffed his candle out and put on his hat. "I want her all day tomorrow, I suppose," said Scrooge. "If quite convenient, sir." "Not convenient," said Scrooge, "and it's not fair. If I was to stop half a crown for it, you'd think yourself ill-used. I'll be bound. The clerk smiled faintly. "And yet," said Scrooge, "you don't think me ill. You used when I pay a day's wages for no work." The clerk observed that it was only once a year. "A poor excuse," for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December, said Scrooge, buttoning up his greatcoat to the chin. But I suppose you must have the whole day. Be here all the earlier next morning. Goat indeed. Goat indeed. The clerk promised that he would, and Scrooge walked out with a growl. The office was closed in a twinkling, and the clerk, with the long ends of his white comforter dangling below his waist, for he boasted no greatcoat, went down a slide on Cornhill at the end of a lane of boys, 20 times in honor of being Christmas Eve, and then ran home to Camden Town as hard as he could pelt to play at blindman's buff. Scrooge took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, and having read all the newspapers and beguiled the rest of the evening with his banker's book, went home to bed. He lived in chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner. They were a gloomy suite of rooms in a lowering pile of buildings up a yard, where it had so little business to be that one could scarcely help fancying it must have run there when it was a young house, playing at hide and seek with other houses, and have forgotten the way out again. It was old enough now and dreary enough, for nobody lived in it but Scrooge, the other rooms being all let out as offices. The yard was so dark that even Scrooge, who knew its every stone, was fain to grope with his hands. The fog and frost so hung about the black old gateway of the house that it seemed as if the genius of the weather sat in mournful mediation on the threshold. Now, it is a fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker or the door, except that it was very large. It is also a fact that Scrooge had seen it night and morning during his whole residence in that place. Also that Scrooge had a little of what is called fancy about, as any man in the city of London, even including, which is a bold word, the corporation alderman in livery. Let it also be borne in mind that Scrooge had not bestowed one thought on Marley since his last mention of his 7 years dead partner that afternoon. And then let any man explain to me, if he can, how it happened that Scrooge, having his key in the lock of the door, saw in the knocker, without it undergoing any intermediate process of change, not a knocker, but Marley's face. The knocker becomes his old partner's face. Marley's face, it was not impenetrable shadow. It was not an Oh my god. Okay. Marley's face. It was not in impenetrable shadow, as the other objects in the yard were, but had a dismal light about it, like a bad lobster in a dark cellar. It was not angry or ferocious, but looked at Scrooge as Marley used to look, with ghostly spectacles turned up on its ghostly forehead. The hair was curiously stirred, as if by breath of hot air, and though the eyes were wide open, they were perfectly motionless. That and its livid color made it horrible, but its horror seemed to be in spite of the face, and beyond its control, rather than a part of its own expression. As Scrooge looked fixedly at this phenomenon, it was a knocker again. To say that he was not startled, or that his blood was not conscious of a terrible sensation to which it had been a stranger from infancy, would be untrue. But he put his hand upon the key he had relinquished, turned it sturdily, walked in, and lighted his candle. He did pause, with a moment's irresolution, before he shut the door. And he did look cautiously behind it first, as if he half expected to be terrified with the sight of Marley's pigtail sticking out into the hall. But there was nothing on the back of the door, except the screws and nuts that held the knocker on. So he said, "Oh, pooh," and closed it with a bang. The sound resounded through the house like thunder. Every room above, and every cask in the wine merchant's cellar below, appeared to have a separate pearl of echo of its own. Scrooge was not a man to be frightened by echoes. He fastened the door and walked across the hall and up the stairs, slowly too, trimming his candle as he went. You may talk vaguely about driving a coach and six up a good fly. You may talk vaguely about driving a coach and six up a good old flight of stairs, or through a bad young Act of Parliament, but I mean to say you might have got a hearse up that staircase, and taken it broadwise, with the splinter bar towards the wall, and the door towards the balustrades, and done it easy. There was plenty of width for that, and room to spare, which is perhaps the reason why Scrooge thought he saw a locomotive hearse going on before him in the gloom. Half a dozen gas lamps out of the street wouldn't have lighted the entry too well, so you may suppose that it was pretty dark with Scrooge's step. Up Scrooge went, not caring a button for that. Darkness is cheap, and Scrooge liked it. But before he shut his heavy door, he walked through his room to see that all was right. He had just enough recollection of the face to desire to do that. Sitting room, bedroom, lumber room, all as they should be. Nobody under the table, nobody under the sofa, a small fire in the grate, spoon and basin ready, and the little saucepan of gruel, Scrooge had a cold in his head. Up on the hob. Nobody under the bed. Nobody in the closet. Nobody in his dressing gown, which was hanging up in a suspicious attitude against the wall. Lumber room as usual. Old fire guard. Old shoes. 2 fish baskets. Washing stand. Or 3 legs and a poker. Quite satisfied, he closed his door and locked himself in. Double locked himself in, which was not his custom. Thus, secured against surprise, he took off his cravat, put on his dressing gown and slippers, and his nightcap, and sat down before the fire to take his gruel. I find it insane that this man is just living like this. Like, there's nothing there. Nothing that ever could be expensive. Just eating his gruel and having fun. It was a very low fire indeed. Nothing on such a bitter night. He was obliged to sit close to it and brood over it. Before he could extract the least sensation of warmth from such a handful of fuel. The fireplace was an old one, built by some Dutch merchant long ago and paved all around with quaint Dutch tiles, designed to illustrate the scriptures. There were Cains and Abels, pharaohs, daughters, queens of Sheba, angelic messengers, descending through the air and on clouds like feather beds. Abrahams, Belshazzars, apostles, putting off to sea in a butter boat. Hundreds of figures to attract his thoughts. And yet, that face of Mali, 7 years dead, came like the ancient prophet rod and swallowed up the whole. If each smooth tile had been a blank first, with power to shape some picture on its surface from the disjointed fragments of his thoughts, there would have been a copy of old Marley's head on everyone. "Humbug!" said Scrooge, and walked across the room. After several turns, he sat down again. As he threw his head back in the chair, his glance happened to rest upon a bell, disused bell, that hung in the room and communicated, for some purpose now forgotten, with the chamber in the highest story of the building. It was, with great astonishment, and with a strange and inexplicable dread, as he looked, he saw the bell begin to swing. It swung so softly in the outset that it scarcely made a sound, but soon it rang out loudly, and so did every bell in the house. This might have lasted half a minute, or a minute, but it seemed an hour. The bells ceased as they had begun together. They were succeeded by a clanking noise. Deep down below, as if some person were dragging heavy chains over the casks in the wine merchant's cellar. Scrooge then remembered to have heard that ghosts in haunted houses were described as dragging chains. The cellar door flew open with a booming sound, and then he heard the noise much louder on the floors below, then coming up the stairs and coming straight towards his door. "It's Hamburg still!" said Scrooge. "I won't believe it." His color changed, though, when, without a pause, it came on through the heavy door and passed into the room before his eyes. Upon its coming in, the dying flame leaped up, as though it cried, "I know him, Marley's ghost," and fell again. The same face, the very same. Marley in his pigtail, usual waistcoat, tights and boots, the tassels on the ladder bristling, like his pigtail at his coat skirt, and the hair upon his head. The chain he drew was clasped about his middle. It was long and wound about him like a tail, and it was made, for Scrooge observed it closely, of cash box, keys, padlocks, ledgers, deeds, and heavy purses wrought in steel. His body was transparent, so that Scrooge, observing him and looking through his waistcoat, could see the two buttons on his coats behind. Scrooge had often heard it said that Marley had no bowels, but he had never believed it until now. No, nor did he believe it even now. So he looked the phantom through and through and saw it standing before him. Though he felt the chilling influence of its death-cold eyes and marked the very texture of the folded kerchief bound about its head and chin, which wrapper he had not observed before. He was still incredulous and fought against his senses. "How now?" said Scrooge, caustic and cold as ever. "What do you want with me?" "Much," Marley's voice, no doubt. "Who are you?" "Ask me who I was." "Who were you then?" said Scrooge, raising his voice. "You're particular for a shade." He was going to say, "to a shade," but substituted this as more appropriate. "In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley." Can you sit down?" asked Scrooge, looking doubtfully at him. "I can." "Do it then." Scrooge asked the question because he didn't know whether a ghost could transplant. Scrooge asked the question because he didn't know whether a ghost so transparent might find himself in a condition to take a chair, and felt that in the event of being impossible, it might involve the necessity of an embarrassing explanation. But the ghost sat down on the opposite side of the fireplace, as if he were used to it. You don't believe in me, observed the ghost. I don't, said Scrooge. What evidence would you have of my reality beyond that of your own senses? I don't know, said Scrooge. Why do you want to doubt your senses? Because, said Scrooge, a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheat. Or maybe an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of underdone potato. There's more gravy than of grave about you, whatever you are. Scrooge was not much in the habit of cracking jokes, nor did he feel in his heart by any means waggish then. The truth is, he tried to be smart, as a means of distracting his own attention and keeping down his terror. For the spectre's voice disturbed the very marrow in his bone. To sit staring at those fixed-glazed eyes in silence for a moment would play. Scrooge felt the very deuce with him. There was something very awful, too, in the spectre's being provided with an infernal atmosphere of his own. Scrooge could not feel himself, but this was clearly the case, for thought the ghost sat perfectly motionless. Its hair and skirts and tassels were still agitated as by a hot vapor from an oven. You see this toothpick? Scrooge said, returning quickly to the charge. For the reason just designed and wishing, though it were only for a second, to divert the vision's stony gaze from himself. I do, replied the ghost. You're not looking at it, said Scrooge. But I see it, said the ghost. Notwithstanding. Well, turned Scrooge, I have to swallow this. And be for the rest of my days persecuted by legions of goblins, all of my own creation. Humbug! I tell you, humbug! At this, the spirit raised a frightful cry, and shook its chains with such a dismal and appalling noise that Scrooge held on tight to his chair to save himself from falling in a swoon. But how much greater was his horror when the phantom, taking off the bandage round his head, as if it were to wear indoors, its lower jaw dropped down to its breast. Scrooge fell upon his knees and clasped. I must, but why do spirits walk the earth, and why do you come to me? To sit staring at those fixed, glazed eyes in silence for a moment would play. Scrooge felt the very deuce with him. It is required of every man, the ghost returned, that the spirit within him should walk abroad amongst his fellow men, and travel far and wide. And if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death. It is doomed to wander through the world. Oh, woe is me, and witness what I cannot share, but might have shared on earth, and turned to happiness. Again the spectre raised a cry, and shook its chain, and wrung its shadowy hands. "You are fettered," said Scrooge, trembling. "Tell me why?" "I wear the chain I forged in life," replied the ghost. "I made it link by link and yard by yard. I girded it on of my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it. It is pattern strange to you?" This is fucking I this is fucking great actually. I love this interpretation that whatever you do in life is gonna haunt you in death. Fucking great. And he has like this entire chain because he was just always being yeah um just the bookkeeper. And yeah, this is fun. I like this. I'm having fun. I hope you all have too. Scrooge trembled more and more. "Oh, would you know," pursued the ghost, "the weight and length of the strong coil you bear yourself? It was full as heavy and as long as this 7 Christmas Eves ago. You have labored on it since. It is a ponderous chain." Scrooge glanced about on the floor in the expectation of finding himself surrounded by some 50 or 60 fathoms of iron cable, but he could see nothing. "Jacob," he said imploringly. "Old Jacob Marley, tell me more. Be comfort to me, Jacob." "I have none to give," the ghost replied. "It comes from other regions, Ebenezer Scrooge, and is conveyed by other ministers to other kinds of men. Nor can I tell you what I would. A very little more is all permitted to me. Cannot rest, cannot stay. I cannot linger anywhere. My spirit never walked beyond our counting house. Mark me. In life, my spirit never roved beyond the narrow limits of our money changing hole, and very journeys lie before me." It was a habit with Scrooge, whenever he became thoughtful, to put his hands in his breeches pockets, pondering on what the ghost had said. He said so now, but without lifting his eyes or getting off his knees. "You must have been very slow about it. You must have been very slow about it, Jacob," Scrooge observed in a businesslike manner, though with humility and deference. "Slow," the ghost repeated. 7 years dead," mused Scrooge, "and traveling all the time. "The whole time," said the ghost. "No rest, no peace, incessant torture of remorse." "You travel fast?" said Scrooge. "On the wings of the wind," replied the ghost. "You might have got over a great quantity of ground in 7 years," said Scrooge. The ghost, on hearing this, set out another cry, and clanked its chain so hideously in the dead silence of the night that the ward would have been justified in indicting it for a nuisance. "Oh, captive, bound and double-ironed," cried the phantom. "Not to know that ages of incessant labor by immortal creatures for this earth must pass into eternity before the good of which it's susceptible is all developed. Not to know that any Christian spirit working kindly in its little sphere, whatever it may be, will find its mortal life too short for its vast means of usefulness. Not to know that no space of regret can make amends for one life's opportunities misused. Yet such was I. Oh, such was I. But you were always a good man of business, Jacob," faltered Scrooge, who now began to apply this to himself. "Business!" cried the ghost, wringing its hands again. "Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but to drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business. At this time of the rolling year," the spectre said, "I suffer the most. Why did I walk through crowds of fellow beings with my eyes turned down, and never raised them to that blessed star which led the wise man to a poor abode? Were there no poor homes to which its light would have conducted me?" Scrooge was very dismayed to hear the spectre going on at this rate, and began to quake exceedingly. "Hear me!" cried the ghost. "My time is nearly gone." "Well," said Scrooge, "but don't be hard upon me. Don't be flowery, Jacob, pray. How is it that I appear before you in shape that you can see? I may not tell. I have sat invisible beside you many and many a day." Was not an agreeable idea. Scrooge shivered, and wiped the perspiration from his brow. That is no light part of my penance," pursued the ghost. "I am here tonight to warn you that you have yet a chance and hope of escaping my fate. A chance and hope of procuring Ebenezer." "You were always a good friend to me," said Scrooge. "Thank ye." "You will be haunted by," resumed the ghost, "by 3 spirits." Scrooge's countenance fell almost as low as the ghost's had done. "Is that the chance and hope you mentioned, Jacob?" he demanded in a faltering voice. "It is. I think I'd rather not," said Scrooge. "Without their visit," said the ghost, "you cannot hope to shun the path I tread. Expect the first tomorrow, when the bell tolls 1. Couldn't I take them all at once and have it over, Jacob?" hinted Scrooge. Expect the second one on the next night at the same hour. The third upon the next night, when the last stroke of 12 has ceased to vibrate. Look to me no more, and look that, for your own sake, you remember what has passed between us. When it had said these words, the spectre took its wrapper from the table and bound it round its head as before. Scrooge knew this by the smart sound its teeth made when the jaws were brought together by the bandage. He ventured to raise his eyes again and found his supernatural visitor confronting him in an erect attitude, with its chain wound over and about its arm. The apparition walked back from him, and at every step it took, the window raised itself a little, so that when the spectre reached it, it was wide open. It beckoned Scrooge to approach, which he did. When they were within 2 paces of each other, Marley's ghost held up its hand, warning him to come no nearer. Scrooge stopped, not so much in obedience as in surprise and fear. For on the raising of the hand, he became sensible of confused noises in the air, incoherent sounds of lamentation and regret, wailings inexpressibly sorrowful and self-accusatory. The spectre, after listening for a moment, joined in the mournful dirge and floated out upon the bleak dark sky. Scrooge followed to the window. Desperate in his curiosity, he looked out. The air was filled with phantoms, wandering hither and thither in the restless haste, and moaning as they went. Every one of them wore chains like Marley's ghost. Some few, they might be guilty governments, were linked together. None were free. Many had been personally known to Scrooge in his lives. He had been quite familiar with one old ghost in a white waistcoat, with a monstrous iron safe attached to his ankle, who cried piteously at being unable to assist a wretched woman with an infant, whom it saw below a doorstep. The misery with them all was, clearly, that they sought to interfere for good in human matters, and had lost the power forever. Whether these creatures faded into mist or mist enshrouded them, he could not tell. But they and their spirit voices faded together, and the night became as it had been when he walked home. Scrooge closed the window and examined the door by which the ghost had entered. It was double locked, as he had locked it with his own hands, and the bolts were undisturbed. He tried to say humbug, but stopped at the first syllable, and being from the emotion he had undergone, or the fatigues of the day, or his glimpse of invisible worlds, or the dull conversation of the ghost, or the lateness of the hour, much in need of repose, went straight to bed without undressing, and fell asleep upon the instant. That was the introduction. That was the introduction. I think I'm gonna read the Christmas, the Ghost of the Christmas Past. So the first ghost, and then we'll see. Because as I said, this is a very, very long story. I just wanted to have a little bit of a. I love Christmas. How's everyone doing? Are you still awake? Or did I put you to sleep? Probably put you all to sleep now. The first of the three spirits. When Scrooge awoke, it was so dark that, looking out of bed, he could scarcely distinguish the transparent window from the opaque walls of his chamber. He was endeavoring to pierce the darkness with his ferret eyes when the chimes of a neighboring church struck the 4 quarters. So he listened for the hour. To his great astonishment, the heavy bell went on from 6 to 7, and from 7 to 8, and regularly up to 12, then stopped. 12. It was past 2 when he went to bed. The clock was wrong. An icicle must have got into the works. 12. He touched the spring of his repeater. To correct this most preposterous clock, its rapid little pulse beat 12 and stopped. Why, it isn't possible, said Scrooge, that I can have slept through the whole day and far into another night. It isn't possible that anything has happened to the sun, and this is 12 at noon. The idea being an alarming one, he scrambled out of bed and groped his way to the window. He was obliged to rub the frost off with the sleeve of his dressing gown before he could see anything, and could see very little then. All he could make out was that it was still very foggy and extremely cold, and that there was no noise of people running to and fro from and making a great stir, as there unquestionably would have been if night had beaten off bright day and taken possession of the world. This was a great relief, because 3 days after sight of this first of exchange pay to Mr. Ebenezer Scrooge or his order, and so forth, would have become a mere United States security if there were no days to count by. Scrooge went to bed again. and thought and thought and thought it over and over, and could make nothing of it. The more he thought, the more perplexed he was, and the more he endeavored not to think, the more he thought. Marley's ghost bothered him exceedingly. Every time he resolved within himself, after mature inquiry, it was all a dream. His mind flew back again, like a strong spring released, to its first position, and presented the same problem to be worked all through. Was it a dream or not? Scrooge lay in this state until the chime had gone 3/4 more, when he remembered all of a sudden that the ghost had warned him of a visitation when the bell tolled 1. He resolved to lie awake until the hour was past, and considering that he could no more go to sleep than go to heaven, this was perhaps the wisest resolution in his power. The quarter was long, that he was more than once convinced he must have sunk into a doze unconsciously amidst the clock. At length it broke upon his listening ear. Ding dong! Quarter past, said Scrooge, counting. Ding dong! 1/2 past, Scrooge. Ding dong! 1/4 to it. Ding dong! The hour itself, said Scrooge triumphantly, and nothing else. He spoke before the bell sounded. He spoke before the hour bell sounded, which it now did with a deep, dull, hollow, melancholy one. Light flashed up in the room up on the instant, and curtains of his bed were drawn. The curtains of his bed were drawn aside. I tell you, by a hand, not the curtains at his feet, nor the curtains at his back, but those to which his face was addressed. The curtains of his bed were drawn aside, and Scrooge, starting up into a half recumbent attitude, found himself face to face with the unearthly visitor who drew them. Close to it, as I am now to you, and I am standing in the spirit at your elbow. Hey, thank you for the hearts and for the smiley. I see it. King Alpha, I know King Alpha does that. It was a strange figure, like a child, yet not so like a child as like an old man, viewed through some supernatural medium, which gave him the appearance of having receded from the view and being diminished to a child's proportion. Its hair, which hung about its neck and down its back, was white as if with age, and yet the face had not a wrinkle on it, and the tenderest bloom was on the skin. The arms were very long and muscular, the hands the same, as if its hold were uncommon strength. Its legs and feet, most delicately formed, were like those upper members. There, it wore a tunic of the purest white, and round its waist was bound a lustrous belt, the sheen of which was beautiful, It held a branch of fresh green holly in its hand, and in singular contradiction of that wintry emblem, had its dress trimmed with summer flowers. But the strangest thing about it was that from the crown of its head there sprung a bright clear jet of light, by which all this was visible, and which was doubtless the occasion of its using, in its duller moments, a greater extinguisher for a cap, which it now held under its arms. Even this, though, when Scrooge looked at it with increasing steadiness, was not its strangest quality. For as its belt sparkled and glittered now in one part and now in another, and what was light one instant at another time was dark, so the figure itself fluctuated in its distinctness, being now a thing with one arm, now with one leg, now with 20 legs, now a pair of legs, without the head, now a head without a body, of which, dissolving part, no outline would be visible. In a dense gloom wherein they melted away, and in the very wonder of it would be itself again, distinct and clear as ever. "Are you the spirit, sir, whose coming was foretold to me?" asked Scrooge. "I am." The voice was soft and gentle, singularly low, as if, instead of being so close beside him, it was at a distance. "Who and what are you?" Scrooge demanded. "I am the ghost of Christmas past." "Long past?" inquired Scrooge, observant of its dwarfish stature. "No, your past." Perhaps Scrooge could not have told anybody why, if anybody could have asked him, but he had a special desire to see the spirit in his cap, and begged him to be covered. "What?" exclaimed the ghost. "Would you so soon put out, with worldly hands, the light I give? Is it not enough that you are one of those whose passions made this cap, and forced me through whole trains of years to wear it low upon my brow?" Scrooge reverently disclaimed all intention to offend or any knowledge of having wilfully bonneted the spirit at any period of his life. He then made bold to inquire what business brought him here. "Your welfare." Scrooge expressed himself much obliged, but could not help thinking that a night of unbroken rest would have been more conducive to that end. The spirit must have heard him thinking, for it said immediately, "Your reclamations, then, take heed." It put out its strong hand as it spoke, and clasped him gently by the arm. "Rise and walk with me." It would have been in vain for Scrooge to plead that the weather and the hour were not adapted to pedestrian purposes. The bed was warm, and the thermometer was a long way below freezing. That he was clad but lightly in his slippers, dressing gown and nightcap, and that he had a cold upon him at the time. The grasp, though gentle as a woman's hand, was not to be resisted. He rose, but finding that the spirit made towards the window, clasped its rope in supplication. I am mortal, Scrooge remonstrated, and liable to fall. Bear but a touch out of my hand there, said the spirit, laying it upon his heart, and you shall be upheld in more than this. As the words were spoken, they passed through the wall and stood upon an open country road, with fields on either hand. The city had entirely vanished, not a vestige of it to be seen. The darkness and the mist had vanished with it, for it was clear, cold, winter day, with the snow upon the ground. Good heaven, said Scrooge, clasping his hands together as he looked about him. I was bred in this place. I was a boy here. He was bred in this place. Wrong choice of words, my best friend. Wrong choice of words. I was bred here. I know what he meant, but the spirit gazed upon him mildly. Its gentle touch, though it had been light and instantaneous, appeared still present to the old man's senses of feeling. He was conscious of what thousand odors floating in the air, each one connected with 1,000 thoughts and hopes and joys and cares long, long forgotten. Your lip is trembling, said the ghost. And what is that about your cheek? Scrooge muttered with an unusual catching in his voice. That it was a pimple, and begged the ghost to lead him where he would. You recollect the way? Inquired the spirit. Remember it, cried Scrooge with fervor. He could walk it blindfold. Strange to have forgotten it for so many years, observed the ghost. Let us go on. They walked along the road, Scrooge recognizing every gate and post and tree, until a little market town appeared in the distance, with its bridge, its church, and winding river. Some shaggy ponies now were seen trotting towards them with boys upon their backs, who called to other boys in the country gigs and carts driven by farmers. All these boys were in great spirits and shouted to each other until the broad fields were so full of merry music that the crisp air loved to hear it. These are but shadows of the things that have been, said the ghost. They have no consciousness of us. The jocund travelers came on, and as they came, Scrooge knew and named them everyone. Why was he rejoiced beyond all bounds to see them? Why did his cold eye glisten and his heart leap up as he went past? Why was he filled with gladness when he heard them give each other Merry Christmas as they parted at crossroads and byways for their several homes? What was Merry Christmas to Scrooge? Out upon Merry Christmas! What good had it ever done to him? The school is not quite deserted, said the ghost. A solitary child, neglected by his friends, is still there, is left there still. Scrooge said he knew it and sobbed. Yeah, of course, because it was him. They left the high road by a well-remembered lane and soon approached a mansion of dull red brick with a little weathercock surmounted cupola on the roof and a bell hanging in it. It was a large house, but one of broken fortunes, for the spacious offices were little used. Their walls were damp and mossy, their windows broken, and their gates decayed. Fowls clucked and strutted in the stables, and the coach houses and sheds were overrun with grass. Nor was it more retentive of its ancient state within, for entering the dreary hall and glancing through the open doors of many rooms, they found them poorly furnished, cold, and vast. There was an earthly savor in the air, a chilly bareness in the place, which associated itself, somehow, with too much getting up by candlelight and not too much to eat. They went, the ghost and Scrooge, across the hall to a door at the back of the house. It opened before them, and disclosed a long, bare, melancholy room, made barer still by lines of plain deal forms and desks. At one of these a lonely boy was reading near a feeble fire, and Scrooge sat down upon a form and wept to see his poor forgotten self as he had used to be. Not a latent echo in the house, not a squeak, and a scuffle from the mice behind the paneling, not a drip from the half-thawed water spout in the dull yard behind, not a sigh among the leafless boughs of one despondent poplar, not the idle swinging of an empty storehouse door, no, not the clicking in the fire, but fell upon the heart of Scrooge with softening influence, and gave a freer passage to his tears. The spirit touched him on the arm and pointed to his younger self, intent upon his reading. Suddenly a man in foreign garments, wonderfully real and distinct to look at, stood outside the window with an axe stuck in his belt, and leading by the bridle an ass laden with wood. Ass is an old word for donkey, YouTube. I did not swear. I just said how it was in the book. Do not demonetize me, YouTube. I'm kidding. I think ass is completely fine. Why, it's Ali Baba! Scrooge exclaimed in ecstasy. It's dear old honest Ali Baba! Yes, I know. One Christmas time, when yonder solitary child was left here alone, he did come, for the first time. Just like that. Poor boy and Valentine, said Scrooge. And his wild brother Orson. There they go. And what's his name? Who was put down in his drawers asleep at the gate of Damascus? Don't you see him? And the Sultan's groom turned upside down by the genie. There he is upon his head. Serve him right. I'm glad of it. What business had he to be married to the princess? Scrooge, expending all the earnestness of his nature in such a subject, in a most extraordinary voice between laughing and crying, and to see his heightened and excited face would have been a surprise to his business friends in the city indeed. There's the parrot, cried Scrooge. Green body and yellow tail, with a thing like a lettuce growing out of the top of its head. There he is. Poor Robin Crusoe. He called him. When he came home after sailing round the island, poor Robin Crusoe. Where have you been, Robin Crusoe? The man thought he was dreaming, but he wasn't. It was the parrot, you know. There goes Friday running for his life to the little creek. Holla! Whoop! Hallo! Then, with the rapidity of transition very foreign to the usual character, he said in a pity for himself, Poor boy! And cried again. I wish, Scrooge muttered, putting his hand in his pocket and looking about him after drying his eyes with his cuff. But it's too late now. What is the matter? Asked the spirit. Nothing, said Scrooge. Nothing. There was a boy singing a Christmas carol at my door last night. I should like to have given him something, that's all. The ghost smiled thoughtfully and waved its hand, saying as it did so, Let us see another Christmas. Scrooge already coming round here. He's like, oh yeah, that one poor boy that was at my door. That one. I need to get to that. Scrooge's former self grew larger at the words, and the room became a little darker and more dirty. The panels shrunk, the windows cracked, fragments of plaster fell off the ceiling, and the naked lads were shown instead. But how all this was brought about, Scrooge knew no more than you do. He only knew that it was quite correct, that everything had happened so, that there he was alone again, when all the other boys had gone home for a jolly holiday. He was not reading now, but walking up and down despairingly. Scrooge looked at the ghost and, with a mournful shaking of his head, glanced anxiously towards the door. It opened, and a little girl much younger than the boy came darting in and putting her arm about his neck, and often kissing him, addressing him as her dear, dear brother. I have come to bring you home, dear brother, said the child, clapping her tiny hands and bending down to laugh. To bring you home, home, home. Home, little fan, returned the boy. Yes, said the child, brimful of glee. Home for good and all. Home for ever and ever. Father is much kinder than he used to be. That home's like heaven. He spoke so gently to me one dear night when I was going to bed that I was not afraid to ask him once more if you might come home. And he said, yes, you should, and sent me in a coach to bring you, and you're to be a man, said the child, opening her eyes, and are never to come back here. But first we are to be together all Christmas long, and have the merriest time in all the world. You're quite a woman, little fan, exclaimed the boy. She clapped her hand and laughed and tried to touch his head, but being too little, laughed again and stood on the tiptoe to embrace him. Then she began to drag him in her childish eagerness towards the door, and he, nothing loath to go, accompanied her. A terrible voice in the hall cried, "Bring down Master Scrooge's box there!" And in the hall appeared the schoolmaster himself, who glared on Master Scrooge with a ferocious condescension, and threw him into a dreadful state of mind. Shaking hands with him, he then conveyed him and his sister into the veriest old well of a shivering best parlor that ever was seen. By the maps upon the wall and celestial and terrestrial globes in the windows were waxy with cold. Here he produced a decanter of curiously light wine and a block of curiously heavy cake, and administered installments of those dainties to the young people, at the same time sending out a meager servant to offer a glass of something to the postboy, who answered that he thanked the gentleman, but if it was the same tap as he had tasted before, he'd rather not. Master Scrooge's trunk being by this time tied onto the top of the chaise, the boy forgot how flowery the text was. Yeah, it's something. It's something, but I like it. It's good old English. It's really good old English. Okay, where was I? I lost my train of thought. At the same time sending out a meager servant to offer a glass of something to the postboy, who answered that he thanked the gentleman, but if it was the same tap that he had tasted before, he'd rather not. Master Scrooge's trunk being by this time tied onto the top of the chaise, the children bade the schoolmaster goodbye right willingly, and, getting into it, drove gaily down the garden sweep, the quick wheels dashing to hoar frost in snow from off the dark leaves of the evergreens like spray. Not a knock, I'm just reminded that this was written right in the middle of the Romantic era writing period. Yeah, yeah, it was. No, and I didn't see it as a knock. It's just when you like read a lot of modern stuff and then go back to this, the prose is very different, and it shows. We've translated, actually. I went to language school. I studied translation, and interpretation, just as a background. And we actually translated parts of this by the end of our studies. I still remember when the teacher came in and answered part of this text. It was not easy. It was really not easy to do this, and it's still also a challenge. I wouldn't say it's hard to read or hard to understand, but it's definitely a challenge to read, especially live on stream. A lot of classics are almost obtuse with their language. How the writing was at the time. Was the trend in the day very different from a lot of modern books that really Tumblr fanfics? That is true too. Always a delicate creature whom a breath might have withered, said the ghost. But she had a large heart. So she had, cried Scrooge. You're right. I will not gainsay it, spirit. God forbid. She died a woman, said the ghost. And had, as I think, children. One child, Scrooge returned. True, said the ghost. Your nephew. Scrooge seemed uneasy in his mind, and answered briefly, yes. Although they had but that moment left the school behind them, they were now in the busy thoroughfares of a city, where shadowy passengers passed and repassed, where shadowy carts and coaches battled for the way, and all the strife and tumult of a real city were. It was made plain enough by the dressing of the shops that here too it was Christmas time again. But it was evening, and the streets were lighted up. The ghost stopped at a certain warehouse door and asked Scrooge if he knew it. Know it, Scrooge. Was I apprentice here? They went in. At sight of an old gentleman in a Welsh wig, sitting behind a high desk, that if he had been 2 inches taller, he must have knocked his head against the ceiling. Scrooge cried in great excitement, Why, it's old Fezziwig! Bless his heart, it's Fezziwig alive again! Old Fezziwig laid down his pen and looked up at the clock, which pointed to the hour of 7. He rubbed his hands, adjusted his capacious waistcoat, laughed all over himself from his shoes to his organ of benevolence, and called out in a comfortable, oily, rich, fat, jovial voice, Yo-ho, Ebenezer, Dick! Scrooge's former self, now grown a young man, came briskly and accompanied by his fellow prentice. Dick Wilkins, to be sure, said Scrooge to the ghost. Bless me, yes, there he is. He was very much attached to me. Was Dick, poor Dick, dear, dear. Yo-ho, my boys, said Fezziwig. No more work tonight. Christmas Eve, Dick. Christmas, Ebenezer. Let's have the shutters up, cried old Fezziwig, with a sharp clap of his hand, before a man can say Jack Robinson. You wouldn't believe how those 2 fellows went at it. They charged into the street with the shutters. 1, 2, 3, had 'em up in their place. 4, 5, 6, barred them and pinned them. 7, 8, 9, and came back before you could have got to the 12, panting like racehorses. Hilly-ho! Cried old Fezziwig, skipping down from the high desk with wonderful agility. Clear away, my lads, and let's have lots of room here. Hilly-ho, Dick! Cheer up, Ebenezer! Ovo! Clear away! There was nothing they wouldn't have cleared away, or couldn't have cleared away with old Fezziwig looking on. It was done in a minute. Every movable was packed off as if it were dismissed from the public life forevermore. The floor was swept and watered, the lamps were trimmed, fuel was heaped upon the fire, and the warehouse was snug and warm and dry and bright. A ballroom as you would desire to see upon a winter's night. In came a fiddler with a music box and went up the lofty desk and made an orchestra of it and tuned like 50 stomach aches. In came Mrs. Fezziwig, one vast substantial smile. In came the 3 Miss Fezziwigs, beaming and lovable. In came the 6 young followers, whose hearts they broke. In came all the young men and women employed in the business. In came the housemaid with her cousin, the baker. In came the cook with her brother's particular friend, the milkman. In came the boy from over the way, who was suspected of not having board enough from his master, trying to hide himself behind the girl from next door, but one who was proved to have had her ears pulled by her mistress. In they all came, one after another, some shyly, some boldly, some gracefully, some awkwardly, some pushing, some pulling. In they all came, and anyhow, and everyhow. Away they all went, 20 couple at once. Hands half round and back again at this other way, down the middle and up again, round and round at various stages of affectionate grouping. Old top couple always turning up in the wrong place, new top couple starting off again as soon as they got there. All top couples at last, and not a bottom one to help them. When this result was brought about, old Fezziwig clapped his hands to stop the dance, cried out, "Well done!" and the fiddler plunged his hot face into a pot of porter, especially provided for that purpose, but scorning the rest upon his reappearance, he instantly began again, though there were no dances yet, as if the other fiddler had been carried home exhausted on a shutter, and he was a brand new man resolved to beat him out of sight or perish. There were more dances, and there were forfeits, and more dances, and there was cake, and there was negus, and there was a great piece of cold roast, and there was a great piece of cold boiled, and there was minced pies, and plenty of beer. But the great effect of the evening came after the roast and boiled, when the fiddler, an artful dog-mind, the sort of man who knew his business better than you and I could have ever told him, struck up Sir Roger de Coverley. Then old Fezziwig stood out to dance with Mrs. Fezziwig. Top couple too, with a good stiff piece of work cut out for them. 3 or 4 and 20 pair of partners. People who were not to be trifled with. People who would dance and had no notion of walking. But if they had been twice as many, 4 times, old Fezziwig would have been a match for them, and so would Mrs. Fezziwig. As to her, she was worthy to be his partner in every sense of the term. If that's not high praise, tell me higher, and I'll use it. A positive light appeared to issue from Mrs. Fezziwig's calves. They shone in every part of the dance like moons. You couldn't have predicted at any given time what would become of the next. And when old Fezziwig and Mrs. Fezziwig had gone all through the dance, advance and retire, both hands to your partner, bow and curtsy, corkscrew, thread the needle, and back again to your place. Fezziwig cut so deftly that he appeared to wink with his legs, and came upon his feet again without a stagger. The description of this dancing scene is amazing. When the clock struck 11, this domestic ball broke up. Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig took their stations on either side the door, and shaking hands with every person individually, as he or she went out, wished him or her a Merry Christmas. When everybody had retired but the two apprentices, they did the same to them, and thus the cheerful voices died away, and the lads were left to their beds, which were under a counter in the back shop. During the whole of this time, Scrooge had acted like a man out of his wits. His heart and soul were in the scene, and with his former self, he corroborated everything, remembering everything, and enjoyed everything, and underwent the strangest agitation. It was not until now, when the bright faces of his former self and Dick were turned from them, that he remembered the ghost, and became conscious that it was looking full upon him, while the light upon its head burned very clear. "A small matter," said the ghost, "to make these silly folks so full of gratitude." "Small!" echoed Scrooge. The spirit signed to him to listen to the two apprentices, who were pouring out their hearts in praise of Fezziwig, and, when he had done so, said, "Why, is it not? He has spent but a few pounds of your mortal money. Why, is it not? He has spent but a few pounds of your mortal money, 3 or 4 perhaps. Is that so much that he deserves this praise?" "It isn't that," said Scrooge, heated by the remark, and speaking unconsciously like his former, not his latter self. "It isn't that, spirit. He has the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our service light or burdensome, a pleasure or a toil. Say that his power lies in words and looks, in things so slight and insignificant that it is impossible to add and count them up. What then? The happiness he gives is quite as great as if it cost a fortune." He felt the spirit's glance and stopped. "What's the matter?" asked the ghost. "Nothing particular," said Scrooge. "Nothing, I think?" the ghost insisted. "No," said Scrooge. "No, I should like to be able to say a word or two to my clerk just now. That's all." His former self turned down the lamps as he gave utterance to the wish, and Scrooge and the ghost again stood side by side In the open air. My time grows short, observed the spirit. Quick! This was not addressed to Scrooge or to anyone whom he could see, but produced an immediate effect. For again Scrooge saw himself. He was older now, a man in the prime of his life. His face had not the harsh and rigid lines of later years, but it had begun to wear the signs of care and avarice. There was an eager, greedy, restless motion in his eye, which showed the passion that had taken root, and there the shadow of the growing tree would fall. He was not alone, but sat by the side of a fair young girl in mourning dress, in whose eyes there were tears which sparkled in the light that shone out of the ghost of Christmas past. It matters little, to you very little. Another idol has displaced me, and if I can cheer and comfort you in time to come, I would have tried to. I have no just cause to grieve. What idol has displaced you? He rejoined. The golden one. This is the even-handed dealing of the world, he said. There is nothing on which it is so hard as poverty, and there is nothing it professes to condemn with such severity to pursue as the pursuit of wealth. You fear the world too much, she answered gently. All your other hopes have merged into the hopes of being beyond the chance of its sordid reproach. I have seen your nobler aspirations fall off one by one until the master passion gain engrosses you, have I not? What then? He retorted. Even if I have grown so much wiser, what then? I am not changed towards you. She shook her head. Am I? Our contract is an old one. It was made when we were both poor and content to be, until, in good season, we could improve our worldly fortune by our patient industry. You are changed. When it was made, you were another man. I was a boy, said impatiently. Your own feeling tells you you are not what you are, she returned. I am that which promised happiness when we were one in heart is fraught with misery now that we are two. How often and how nearly I have thought of this, I will not say. It is enough that I have thought of it and can release you. Have I ever sought release? In words? No, never. In what then? In a changed nature, in an altered spirit, in another atmosphere of life, another hope as its great end, in everything that made my love of any worth or value in your sight. If this had never been between us, said the girl, looking mildly but with steadiness upon him. Tell me, would you seek me out and try to win me now? Ah, no. He seemed to yield to the justice of this superstition in spite of himself. But he said with a struggle, "You think not?" "I would gladly think otherwise if I could," she answered. Heaven knows, when I have learned a truth like this, I know how strong and irresistible it must be. But if you were free today, tomorrow, yesterday, can I believe what you would choose a dowerless girl? You, who in your very confidence with her weigh everything by gain, or choosing her, if for a moment you were false enough in your own guiding principle to do so? Do I not know that that your repentance and regret would surely follow? I do, and I release you with a full heart for the love of him you once were. He was about to speak, but with her head turned from him, she resumed, "You may, the memory of what is past half makes me hope you will have pain in this. A very, very brief time, and you will dismiss the recollection of it gladly, as an unprofitable dream, from which it happened well that you awoke. May you be happy in the life you have chosen." She left him as they parted. "Spirit," said Scrooge, "show me no more. Conduct me home. Why do you delight in to torture me?" "One shadow more," exclaimed the ghost. "No more!" cried Scrooge. "No more! I don't wish to see it. Show me no more." But the relentless ghost pinioned him in both his arms and forced him to observe what happened next. They were in another scene and place, a room not very large or handsome, but full of comfort. Near to the winter fire sat a beautiful young girl. So, like Scrooge, so like that last that Scrooge believed it was the same, until he saw her, now a comely matron, sitting opposite her daughter. The noise in this room was perfectly tumultuous, for there were more children there than Scrooge in his agitated state of mind could count, and unlike the celebrated herd in the poem, they were not 40 children, conducting themselves like one, but every child was conducting itself like 40. The consequences were uproarious beyond belief, but no one seemed to care. On the contrary, the mother and daughter laughed heartily and enjoyed it very much, and the latter soon beginning to mingle in the sports, but pillaging by the young brigands most ruthlessly. What would I not have given to be one of them? Though I never would have been so rude. No, no. I wouldn't for this wealth of all the world have crushed that braided hair and tore it down. And for the precious little shoe, I sure wouldn't have plucked it off. God bless my soul. To save my life, it's measuring her waist in sport, as they did bold young bold young brood, I couldn't have done it. I would have expected my arm to have grown round it for a punishment, and never come straight again. And yet I should have dearly liked, I own, to have touched her lips, to have questioned her, that she might have opened them, to have looked upon the lashes of her downcast eyes, and never raised a blush, to have let loose waves of hair an inch of which would be a keepsake beyond price. In short, I would have liked, I do confess, to have had the lightest license of a child, and yet to have been man enough to know its value. But now a knocking at the door was heard, and such a rush immediately ensued that she, with laughing face and plundered dress, was borne towards it in the center of the flushed and boisterous group, just in time to greet the father, who came home attended by a man laden with Christmas toys and presents. Then the shouting and struggling, and the onslaught that was made on the defenseless porter, the scaling him with chairs and ladders, to dive into his pockets, despoil him of brown paper parcels, hold on tight by a cravat, hug him round the neck, pummel his back and kick his legs in irresistible affection. The shouts of wonder and delight with which the development of every package was received. The terrible announcement that the baby had been taken in the act of putting a doll's frying pan into his mouth, and was more than suspected of having swallowed a fictitious turkey, glued on a wooden platter. The immense relief of finding this false alarm, the joy and gratitude of ecstasy, they are all indescribable alike. It is enough that by degrees the children and their emotions got out of the parlor and sit, and by one stair at the time, up to the top of the house, where they went to bed and subsided. And now Scrooge looked on more attentively than ever, when the master of the house, having his daughter leaning fondly on him, sat down with her and her mother at his own fireside. And when he thought that such another creature, quite graceful and as full of promise, might have called him father, and been a springtime in the haggard winter of his life, his sight grew very dim indeed. "Well," said the husband, turning to his wife with a smile, "I saw an old friend of yours this afternoon. Who was it? Guess." "How can I? But don't I know?" she said in the same breath, laughing as he laughed. "Mr. Scrooge." "Mr. Scrooge it was. I passed his office window, and as it was not shut up, and he had a candle inside, I could scarcely help seeing him. His partner lies upon the point of death, I hear, and there he sat alone. Quite alone in the world, I do believe." "Spirit," said Scrooge in a broken voice, "remove me from this place." "I told you these were shadows of the things that have been," said the ghost. "That they were. that they are what they are. Do not blame me. Remove me, Scrooge exclaimed. I cannot bear it. He turned upon the ghost, and seeing that it looked upon him with a face in which, in some strange way, were fragments of all the faces it had shown him, wrestled with it. Leave me! Take me back! Haunt me no longer! In the struggle, if that can be called a struggle, in which the ghost, with no visible resistance on its own, was undisturbed by any effort of its adversary, Scrooge observed that its light was burning high and bright, and dimly connecting that with its influence over him, he seized the extinguisher cap, and by a sudden action pressed it down upon the head. The spirit dropped beneath it, so that the extinguisher covered its whole form. But though Scrooge pressed it down with all his force, he could not hide the light, which streamed from under it in an unbroken flood upon the ground. He was conscious of being exhausted and overcome by an irresistible drowsiness, and further, of being in his own bedroom. He gave the cap a parting squeeze, in which his hand relaxed, and had barely time to reel to bed before he sank into a heavy sleep. Yeah, and this is where I ended because my voice is so hoarse right now. You probably can hear it. That it's a bit rough, and before I just wreck my voice completely, I will save this for part 2, which will happen. Yeah, it takes practice to be able to do read-alongs. Yeah. So, as I said, I will be back with this. Christmas is not over yet. And with that being said, I've been TheOrcosaurus, and I see you all soon. Take care, everyone. And bye-bye.